Welcome back to the comics class. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We're not going to be taking a look at a particular comic. Instead, we're going to be taking a look at Marvel's newest, most lovable character, which of course is Groot.
I am Groot.
I am not boring, you're boring.
We'll be going over the origins of Groot, all the way up to how he became part of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And hopefully, by the end of this video, you have a pretty good understanding of the character. So Groot, up until now, has essentially been given two different origin stories that were released within a year of each other. And I'll give you both of those origin stories and kind of let you decide which one you think is Groot's true origins. But first, I just want to mention, this is a new channel. And in the spirit of Thanksgiving, I would sure be thankful if you hit that like button and that subscribe button. But let's get into the first one. And this is going to be the most recent origin story that has been released for Groot. And this was released in 2015 in Groot's own series called Groot. And we're going to start with Groot and Rocket on planet Earth. And Groot's looking a little bummed out. This is because what Groot really wants to do is go party with the X-Men. And when they get to the party, what Groot really wants to do is find Jean Grey. And the reason why he wants to find Jean is one, that she can easily communicate with him using telepathy. But more importantly, Groot wants her to find a memory of his and link that memory with the person he shared that memory with, who was on Earth, so that he can go and find that person. And Jean is a little reluctant at first to go inside of Groot's mind, but she eventually does, and she's a bit taken back about how much is going on within Groot's head. And this is something that I actually really want to stress, is the reason why there's so much going on in Groot's head is because he's actually highly intelligent, like genius level intelligence. And I feel like how Groot is perceived, especially in the movies, is that he's kind of just a big brute, but he's actually one of the smartest people in Marvel. And one subject matter that he excels in is quasi-dimensional engineering. So yeah, pretty complicated subject on top of that. It's just that nobody knows how smart he is just because nobody can understand him. But Jean is able to find the memory that Groot is interested in, and the story then flashes back to this memory. And we're taken back to when Groot was young, on his home planet of Planet X. And the story shows that Groot is kind of a misfit within this planet. He didn't really fit in, and he especially did not fit in with the ideology of his people. What his planet did was conquer. They were a planet that would basically do anything at any means to expand their empire. And this meant expanding their empire of fear, and expanding their empire of intelligence, no matter what it cost. And the way they expanded their intelligence is by abducting species on every planet, bringing them back to Planet X, and then doing experiments on them. And this was okay with everyone. And mostly just because this was just what they did. This is what Planet X was known for. You know, kind of like on our planet, it's, you know, we're born, we go to school, we get a job, and we retire. For them, they're born, they grow up, and then they evade worlds. And Groot even says that it was all that I knew. So I don't know if that's kind of implying that, you know, maybe at a previous time, Groot actually participated in these invasions and took some different people from their planet to do experiments on. But they leave that part pretty vague. But as Groot's kind of walking by himself, thinking about what his place is on his planet, he comes across a little girl inside of a tube. And obviously this is a little girl that was abducted and is basically just sitting there waiting to be experimented on. And as Groot looks upon this little girl, a huge wave of guilt and unrest kind of comes over him. Just by looking at this innocent little girl, he knows that what they're doing is wrong. And Groot makes a sudden gut decision. He takes the little girl out of her tube, which immediately sets off alarms. He takes her with her, and he begins to run off with now a horde of Groots chasing after them. He sits the girl down on a little transportation plate. He grows her a little flower just to try to comfort her and sends her back home. And when all the other Groots catch up with him, he is of course banished from Planet X. And he wanders space until he finally found a new home with the Guardians. But throughout all the years, Groot never actually regretted the decision he made that night. So the story then jumps back to Jean and Groot. Groot wants is to find this little girl. And Jean is actually able to find her. But then we flash back to the little girl when she first was returned to Earth that night from Groot. And what she does is she plants that flower that Groot grew her, and it has now blossomed into a tree. But now today, that little girl has now grown into an old woman. And Groot knows that she lived her life knowing that the only reason she has a life to live is because Groot saved her that night. That shows her sharing her life and what she's been able to do thanks to him. The story kind of ends in this very cheesy, it's better to use your strength to be a friend than an enemy. I don't know, some real Disney stuff like that. And that's the first beginning origins for Groot that we're going to cover. The second one is actually pretty similar, but yet a lot more graphic, to put it lightly. And actually, I think Marvel actually uses this second story that we're going to go into kind of as their official Groot origins. And I really just think the first one was just more of a kid-friendly origin for Groot. But let's get into the second origin story. And this story was released in 2014 in the Guardians of the Galaxy issue 14. And this story also opens with Groot on his home world of Planet X, which is the capital of the branch world. And notice that all the wood people are saying the now famous phrase, I am Groot. And if you don't know, Groot is actually the species of these wood people. So it would be like us saying, I am human. And the reason why Groots are limited in speech is because they suffer from a genetic disorder that causes the larynx to tighten, which limits their speech. But they are actually still able to communicate fully, using different sighs and breezes beneath their words. But each day at sunrise, the Groot people are able to absorb knowledge by the collective consciousness of generations of the Arbor Masters. And what the Arbor Masters are they're basically the kings of this planet. And they also act as teachers and protectors. But they are definitely treated like royalty. But the Groot people are not the only species on Planet X. However, they are the most intelligent and certainly the most powerful. However, there are a assortment of smaller mammals and fungi that the Groots use to do basically their grunt work. If I was to compare, it'd be like the peasants in medieval time. But in fact, Groot cares for these little creatures. And it kind of shows that he basically relates better with these creatures than he does with his own peers. And he likes to spend more time with these creatures than his own peers. And was shown one day Groot kind of just spending some time in the woods by himself. And when he starts to make his way back home, he hears a scream. And it sounds like one of those small creatures yelling. So of course Groot goes to check to see if everything is okay. And Groot sees what was causing the screaming. He sees a number of other Groots his age. And I'm kind of just guessing, but just compared to the size of these Groots compared to some of the other Groots we've seen, I'm going to ballpark that Groot's probably a teenager at this point. But these Groots have a little squirrel-looking creature, and they're doing what teenagers will tend to do a lot, which is be little jerks. And they're kind of picking on this little squirrel guy. And it looks like one is actually about to go in to punch him. That is, until they hear something behind them, which is, of course, Groot. And Groot gives these punk Groots what they have coming to them. I mean, it's 1 against 4, and our Groot just wrecks all 4 of them. It's a pretty one-sided battle. Groot even headbutts one of the other Groot's wooden eye right out, and the group runs away, shameful and embarrassed. But these punk Groots aren't done yet. They kind of stay behind and wait till Groot leaves. And when they think the coast is clear, they come back to kill. And they are just rampaging through these little creatures' home. But Groot hears all the commotion, and he goes back. Oh, and he is not happy when he gets back. And he absolutely goes off on these Groots. I mean, he destroys them. I mean, he's punching a hole right through one of them. He's tearing them wooden limb to wooden limb. I mean, he makes this comic go R-rated really fast. And when he's done beating these Groots, it's shown that he's literally beaten them until just shreds of wood. Also, keep in mind that this doesn't actually kill any of them. As you saw in the Guardians movie, if you just replant any part of them, they will regrow. But when Groot gets back to his home, the Arbor Masters are there waiting for him. And they're not exactly too thrilled about Groot essentially turning these other Groots into mulch. And he is, again, banished from Planet X. And the story ends with him boarding the ship and departing from his home world. And that is the second origin that has been given for Groot. And I really think that this second one is probably his more official one. And just because, I mean, if he's going to be a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, that job just entails a little bit of necessity to violence, which obviously in this second story, Groot really had no issue with. And the first story was just a little too kidsy, to showing Groot too much of a pacifist to actually have him being a Guardian be a believable story. But it's your choice to believe whichever one you want. And after Groot is kicked off from Planet X, it doesn't show why or how, but he finds a way to get to Earth. And what I think is the next chronological appearance of Groot is actually his first appearance in Marvel Comics, which was in the 1960 issue of Tales to Astonish number 13. And Groot being created in 1960 means that there are only a handful of Marvel heroes older than Groot. I mean, Captain America and Namor are obviously older than him, and Groot was never really intended to become a hero. And on top of that, Groot was actually created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And I highly doubt that either of these comic legends would have ever guessed that Groot would be a staple in Marvel today. So Groot's introductory story actually opens with a biologist by the name of Leslie Evans. And yes, Leslie, in this case, is a man's name. And he is met by his girlfriend or wife, doesn't really say, who's shown to be scared. And the reason why is because 2 of their trees have gone missing. One of her friends has a wooden fence that has disappeared. That is scary stuff. And Leslie at first just tries to blow her off. He says that it's probably just some prank being done. But the woman is insistent, and the 2 go check out some nearby woods to investigate if anything shady is going on. And when they get into the woods, what they discover is a giant Groot. And it shows that Groot is controlling nearby wooden objects, which, if you are unaware of, Groot actually has the power to control trees and plants that are nearby. So Leslie leaves, and what he does is form a good old-fashioned posse. And I feel like it should be harder to convince people in town that there's a giant monster tree coming at them, but they all believe it, and the posse forms a little barrier at the edge of town, and they wait for Groot to approach them. And when Groot finally gets there, he tells these country folk, "Hear me. I am Groot, monarch of Planet X. I come to take your village back to my planet to experiment on." And as you can see, when Groot was first introduced, he was not limited to "I am Groot." He could actually speak perfect English. When the posse hears this, they understandably freak out and begin opening fire on Groot. However, their guns do nothing to slow the giant Groot. They even try to set Groot on fire, which if you didn't know, Groot is actually fireproof as well. Groot, like all good villains, tells them his evil plan without even being asked. And his plan is to build a giant wall of trees, then have those trees dig their roots down in the earth to form a net around the town, and then pull the town out from the earth and into space, and travel back to Planet X. And if Groot would have been successful at this mission, he would have felt pretty silly when he got to his home planet and found everyone in the town is dead, because the whole thing of people needing oxygen. And it shows Leslie talking some smack to Groot, and then immediately running away, like a real man. And where Leslie runs off to is back to his lab, and his girlfriend or wife meets him there, and she's extremely critical to him about how he is not man enough to fight the monsters like those other men. But Leslie ignores her insults and continues to work all throughout the next day. And by then, Groot is nearly finished with his evil plan. Leslie then sneaks up behind Groot, drops off a package, and runs away cowardly again. But within minutes, Groot starts to feel a strange pain and drops dead. And once Groot has fallen, Leslie explains that while he was in his lab, he was busy breeding termites. Yes. And then he released those termites on Groot, which then ate that giant tree within minutes. And this story wraps up with Leslie's girlfriend loving him again because he's not the weak coward she assumed he was. But after Groot is defeated here, he doesn't again appear in another comic book issue for 16 years. And he's still on Earth. And this is where we get to see the epic battle of Groot versus the Hulk. So the year is 1976, in the Incredible Hulk Annual number 5, when Hulk is pitted against 6 different monsters. And Groot is the third monster up to fight the Hulk. And as Hulk is walking, that sneaky Groot jumps him, uses his powers to trap the Hulk with some branches. And as the Hulk is trapped, the two then engage in some really bad trash talk. Hulk gets offended when Groot calls him a human, and Groot, who can still obviously talk in perfect English, is still claiming to be king of Planet X. And once Hulk is able to break all the branches holding him, the two jump into a pretty lengthy battle. And Hulk begins the fist fight by giving him one of his best punches, although Groot isn't even knocked back by this. And Groot responds by giving Hulk probably one of the most epic backhands in Hulk history. Sends him flying. And it kind of shows Hulk being a little worried because, he gave everything in that first punch. And Groot didn't even move. And of course, Groot tells him why. It's because he dug his roots into the ground. So what does Hulk do? Well, he just rips the entire ground out. And Groot is like, dang, this guy's pretty strong. But he answers back by shooting an assault of needle darts. And Hulk has to take cover by picking up a giant rock and using it like a shield, Captain America style. And this is effective. So Hulk sticks with his rock strategy. And Hulk unleashes a constant attack of rock hits on Groot's face. And while Hulk is mercilessly beating Groot, he starts talking with him. He tells Groot that, hey, I didn't want to fight. Why don't you just listen to me? And he asks Groot, do you just understand that? I don't want to fight. And when Hulk finally stops beating him senseless to let Groot answer his question, it shows that the Hulk has beaten Groot down into a smoking stump. So Groot is once again defeated, and the Hulk goes on his merry way to fight another 3 villains. And the result of this battle really shouldn't surprise you. Hulk's going to win that fight basically every time. Groot's strong, but he ain't Hulk strong. But the stories that come next is really what sets Groot on the path to becoming a Guardian of the Galaxy. However, Groot isn't actually seen again for another 30 years in comics, unless you count the 1997 story where Groot made a very small cameo in a Spider-Man story, but that was just a nightmare that Peter Parker was having, where he goes on some adventures with Uncle Ben. I don't know, the whole story is pretty weird. However, Groot gets his first recurring role in comics in 2006 in a series called Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos. And please, don't look this up to read. It's just an awful, awful series.
It's bad. It's real bad.
Let me give you the premise. Nick Fury is recruiting a team of monsters, so not heroes, just monsters, to fight against the wizard Merlin, but one of the monsters that they track down is of course Groot. And they eventually subdue Groot, and Groot decides to actually join the team to help Nick Fury. And the reason why Groot wants to join the team is because he's basically done being a villain. He wants to fix his reputation on Earth as always being a bad guy and start a new life. But after he leaves the Howling Commandos, Groot finally gets a chance to get back into space. Unfortunately, though, for Groot, he is quickly imprisoned by the Kree. And in 2007, during the Annihilation Conquest story, Peter Quill is putting together a team to help destroy the Phalanx. Peter Quill recruits a team of prisoners from the Kree prisons. And some of the members are going to include Mantis, Captain Universe, and of course, Rocket Raccoon, and our beloved Groot. And it's actually shown during one of these missions that Groot sacrifices himself and is killed. However, Rocket is able to keep a shred of wood, replant him, and this is where we are first shown a not so cute version of baby Groot, who is actually now able to talk. However, it's only in the third person. And obviously the surviving members of this group go on to form the Guardians of the Galaxy. And that's basically the origins from how Groot was just a little kid on his home world to becoming a Guardian of the Galaxy. Well, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you guys have a pretty good understanding of Groot. And if you like this video, make sure you slap that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, then hit that subscribe button. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.